Welcome to the Night Audio Stories channel. This is a horror story called Mile 247. When Robert, Bob McPherson, first saw that kid on the shoulder of Interstate 95, it was already past midnight. A November night in Maine, that's not just darkness, it's something thicker, something primal that remembers times when these forests hadn't yet known the axe. Bob was driving his Kenworth from Bangor to Holton, hauling a load of appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, all the mundane junk for big box stores. 43 years old, 22 of them behind the wheel, 2 marriages, both fallen apart, 3 kids he hadn't spoken to in about 5 years. Bob McPherson's life fit inside this cab. A thermos of coffee, a photo of his youngest daughter, Emmy, from back when she still loved him, a pack of Marlboros, and a radio that mostly picked up static and old country songs. The headlights swept across the shoulder. A kid stood by a metal highway sign reading Holton 47 miles, thumb extended. Classic Hitchhiker. Bob almost drove past. Rule number 1 for truckers, never pick anyone up, especially at night, especially in Maine, where half the small towns look like time stopped somewhere in the 50s, and not in a good way. But something made him break. Maybe it was how the kid stood, not cocky, not aggressive, just standing there, like someone with nowhere else to go. Skinny, in a denim jacket, clearly not warm enough for this weather. No backpack, no bag, just him and this empty road. Bob stopped the truck with a hiss of air brakes, rolled down the window. "Where you headed?" he called out. The kid walked closer. He was about 20, maybe a bit older. Thin face, gaunt, but eyes bright, almost feverishly bright. Dark hair, wet from the night fog. "Holton, if you're going that way." Voice quiet, raspy. "If you're going that way." Bob hesitated. Every instinct screamed, "Drive on." But he thought about Emmy, about how she was out there somewhere in Portland, living her life, and if she ended up on an empty road at night, he'd want someone to stop, someone good. "Get in," he said. The kid smiled, weakly, gratefully, and walked around the truck. A moment later, the passenger door opened, and he climbed into the cab, bringing with him the smell of wet earth and something else, something metallic. "Thanks," the kid said, settling in. "Didn't think anyone would stop." "I usually don't," Bob replied, shifting into gear. The truck pulled back onto the highway. "What's your name?" "Richard. Rick." The kid wiped his palms on his jeans. "And you?" "Bob." He glanced at his passenger. "Where you from, Rick? What are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere at 1 in the morning?" Rick was silent, stared out the windshield where the headlights illuminated an endless black ribbon of asphalt. "Long story," he finally said. "I've got 47 miles, Bob replied. "That's about 40 minutes. If you want to talk, talk. If not, that's fine too." Rick smiled again, but there was something sad in his smile. "You're a good man, Bob." "Not sure about that, but I try." Mile after mile, the road unfurled before them. Maine's forests stood on both sides like a solid wall. Pines, spruces, birch, everything blending into one black sea. The radio played something country quietly. Bob smoked. Rick sat staring out the window. "You running from someone?" Bob asked after a while. Not accusingly, just asked. Rick slowly turned his head. "In a way." "Police?" "No." The kid rubbed his face with his palms. "Worse." Bob took a drag on his cigarette. Didn't push. If the kid wanted to talk, he'd talk. If not, his right. "Do you believe in Curses, Bob? Rick suddenly asked. Bob looked at him in surprise. In what? Curses, evil, things that can't be explained. Rick spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. Things that follow you, that won't let go. Look, kid, Bob tried to keep his voice calm. If you've got problems, maybe you need to talk to someone, a psychologist or... I'm not crazy, Rick interrupted. Not rudely, but firmly. I wish I was crazy. That would be easier. Bob said nothing, just drove. Thought about how maybe he'd made a mistake picking up this kid. Maybe he really did have problems, but they'd already gone 20 miles, 27 to Holton. Bob could handle it. See that turnoff ahead? Rick suddenly said, pointing at something outside the window. Bob squinted. Ahead, about 200 yards, was a small dirt road branching off the highway to the left, barely visible, half overgrown with grass, an old wooden sign, half rotted. What about it? Turn there, Rick said. Bob laughed. No, kid, I'm hauling freight to Holton. I get paid to drive on the highway, not... Please. Rick's voice changed. Something pleading appeared in it, almost desperate. Please, just turn there. Just look. Look at what? Bob was starting to get irritated. Listen, if you're planning to... There's someone there, Rick said quietly. There's always someone there. And if you don't look, if you just drive past, it'll happen again. Bob hit the brakes. The truck slowed, stopped on the shoulder. He turned to Rick, feeling anger rising in his chest. All right, enough. What are you talking about? What nonsense? If you need help, say it normally. If not, get out. I don't have time for... But Rick was looking at him with such eyes, so empty, so sad, that Bob's anger suddenly evaporated. Something else came instead, something like fear. Please, Rick whispered, just turn. 2 minutes. Just look. Then I'll get out. I promise. Bob stared at him for a long time. Then, cursing himself for an idiot, he turned on the signal and slowly turned onto the dirt road. A narrow path framed by trees. Branches on both sides scraped against the truck's metal. The headlights illuminated uneven ground, puddles, leaves. Bob drove slowly, about 20 miles per hour, listening to the suspension creak. Where are we going? He asked. Rick didn't answer, sat upright, tense, staring ahead. And then Bob saw it. An old cabin, wooden, half destroyed, in the middle of a small clearing, windows broken, roof caved in, doors wide open, black as a mouth. But it wasn't the cabin that caught Bob's attention. A car stood by the door, a Honda Accord, blue, a model from the 90s, driver's door open, headlights burning, though dimly, battery almost dead. And by the car, on the ground, lay something dark, something that wasn't moving. God, Bob whispered, is that... He didn't finish, already jumping from the cab, running across the clearing, heart pounding, only one thought spinning in his head. Someone needs help. Someone's hurt. He ran to the car, fell to his knees by the dark figure. A young woman, about 25, light hair, bloodied face. She wasn't breathing, eyes open, staring at nothing. On her throat, a deep cut, blood everywhere, on the ground, on her clothes, on the open car doors. Bob recoiled, feeling his stomach rising to his throat. 22 years on the road, he'd seen accidents, seen death. But this was something else. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. No, he muttered, reaching into his pocket for his phone. Need to call police, ambulance. Though it's too late. She's dead, obviously dead. "She's not the first," came a voice behind him. Bob spun around sharply. Rick stood there in the light of the truck's headlights. His face was calm, too calm. "What did you say?" Bob's voice trembled. "She's not the first," Rick repeated, "and not the last. If you'd driven past, she would have died alone, in the darkness, and no one would have found her body for weeks, maybe months." Bob stood up, hands shaking. How did you know she was here? How did you know?" Rick smiled sadly. "Because I always know, Bob. Always." He took a step forward. 9 years ago, I picked someone up on the road, just like you picked me up. An old man. He told me to turn, show him something, and I saw the body, saw the victim, and then he told me the truth." "What truth?" Bob was backing away, hand reaching for his phone. "That it's a curse," Rick said calmly. "Someone has to find them. Someone has to see. Someone has to carry this knowledge and pass it on. Otherwise," he gestured around, "otherwise they keep killing again and again, every night, on all the roads." Bob pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold it. "You're insane. You're fucking insane. I'm calling the police, and—" "They won't believe you," Rick said quietly. "They'll say you killed her. Your prints on the body. Your truck here. No witnesses. Just you and a dead woman. And me? Well, I won't be here. I was never here." Bob looked around. The truck stood behind him, headlights shining. Rick stood between him and the vehicle, but something in the kid's words, something terribly true. "Who does this?" Bob whispered. "Who kills them?" Rick shrugged. "I don't know. 9 years I've driven these roads, seen 27 bodies. 27 souls who died alone in the dark. Men, women, children, always near old cabins, always on dirt roads, always at night." He paused, then added, "And every time I pick someone up on the highway, I have a choice. Show them or drive past. But if I drive past, the next night there are more, many more." "That's impossible," Bob said, though his voice no longer sounded convincing. "You can check." Rick pointed at the woman. "Look in her pockets. Wallet. ID." Bob, not understanding why, approached the body, felt in the woman's jeans pocket for a wallet, pulled it out, opened it with trembling fingers. Driver's license. Photo. The same woman, only alive, smiling. Name, Jennifer Coltrane. Address, Portland, Maine. Date of birth, April 15, 1999. 27 years old. In the wallet was also a photograph. Jennifer with a small boy, about 3 years old, both smiling. On the back, handwritten, "Me and Jacob, June 2025. Bob's breath caught. This woman had a child. Somewhere out there in Portland, a little boy was waiting for a mom who would never come home. "See," Rick said quietly, "she was real, had a life, family, and now it's all been taken in the darkness for no reason." Bob lowered the wallet, felt tears burning his eyes. 19 years he hadn't cried, not even when Emmy said she hated him, not even when signing divorce papers the second time. But now, "What should I do?" he whispered. Rick stepped closer, put a hand on his shoulder. "Call the police. Tell them. They'll take her body, find her family, give her a proper burial. That's all you can do for her." "And for the others?" asked Bob, raising his head, looking Rick in the eyes. "You said there are 27. What about them?" "They're dead, Bob. Long dead. But now you know. Now you carry this knowledge. And when you see someone on the shoulder at night, someone asking for a ride, you'll stop. Because if you don't..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Bob slowly nodded, pulled out his phone, dialed 911. "Emergency dispatch?" came a woman's voice. I found a body. Young woman. Looks like murder. I'm on a dirt road off Interstate 95, mile 247. Old cabin. Blue Honda. Please come quickly." He gave details, answered questions, tried to keep his voice steady. And when he finally lowered the phone, he turned around. Rick was gone. Bob looked around. The clearing was empty. Just him, the dead woman, the Honda with its half-dead battery, and the truck. No trace of the kid, as if he'd never been there. But Bob knew he had been, and everything he'd said. He looked at Jennifer Coltrane's body, at her open eyes staring at the empty sky. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry I couldn't do more." The police arrived in 15 minutes, then investigators. The interrogation lasted hours. They were suspicious, of course they were. A trucker in the middle of the night finds a body, no witnesses, strange story about a hitchhiker they couldn't find. But his story held up. His prints didn't match those found on the knife. The knife was found in the cabin, abandoned by the killer. His alibi checked out. Cameras at a gas station in Bangor showed he really was driving this road. And most importantly, forensics showed Jennifer Coltrane had been dead about 3 hours when Bob found her. She was killed around 10 p.m., body left in the cabin. No one would have found her for a very, very long time. If not for Bob. They released him at dawn. Bob got in his truck, which the police finally allowed him to take, and drove. Not to Holton. The freight didn't matter anymore. Home, to his empty apartment in Bangor. He drove and thought about Rick, about 27 bodies, about the curse, about how he knew now, and now he was part of this. The first 2 weeks Bob tried to forget, return to work, rungs, roads, freight, tried not to think about that night, about the dead woman, about Rick, but he couldn't. Every time he saw someone on the shoulder at night, his heart pounded, drove past, twice, 3 times, 5 times, just people who needed help, students whose car broke down, a woman with a flat tire, a man who got lost. Bob drove past them all. And at night, Jennifer Coltrane haunted his dreams. Her open eyes haunted him. Little Jacob crying, waiting for Mommy, haunted him. The newspapers wrote about the murder. Portland woman found dead near Interstate 95. Police looking for suspects, but there were no leads, no clues, just another unsolved murder in a long list. Bob read the articles, searched for information, and found it. Over the past 10 years, 43 people had disappeared on Maine's roads, simply vanished. Cars found abandoned by dirt roads, personal belongings in place, bodies never. 43. Bob made a list, names, dates, locations, drew a map on a large sheet of paper that he hung on his apartment wall. Red pins, disappearance sites, blue lines connecting Interstate 95, Route 1, Route 2, all the major highways. The pattern emerged slowly, but it was there. all disappearances at night, all near old abandoned buildings, cabins, farmhouses, closed gas stations, places everyone forgot about. And, scariest of all, every few months there were more. In 2015, 3 disappearances. In 2016, 5. In 2020, 8. In 2024, 9. In 2025, 12. A progression. Bob sat in front of this map, smoking cigarette after cigarette, and understood. Rick told the truth, the whole truth. Someone was killing people, or something, and doing it systematically, every night, on Maine's roads. But why didn't the police see this? Why didn't anyone connect the dots? Because they don't want to see, Bob understood. Because if you admit this is real, then you have to admit that in Maine, in the heart of civilized America, a serial killer operates who can't be stopped for years, decades. Or it's something worse than a serial killer. A month after that night, Bob was driving on Route 1, run to Presque Isle. Winter night, snow, road almost empty, radio playing something quiet. Bob was thinking about his map, about the next pin he'd add, when he heard about another disappearance. And then he saw her. Girl on the shoulder. Young, about 18, blonde curls, red jacket, standing in the falling snow, hand extended. Bob started braking before he even realized it. The truck stopped. He rolled down the window. "You need help?" The girl approached, face red from cold, lips trembling. "Please," she said, "my car, it died about 3 miles back. Phone's dead. I was walking, and..." Her voice broke. "Please, I just need to get to the nearest town. A phone to call my parents." Bob looked at her. 18 years old. Emmy's age. "Get in," he said. She climbed into the cab, bringing cold and the smell of snow. Sat down, huddling in her jacket, shivering. Thank you so much. I thought I'd freeze out there." Bob turned the heat on full, got out the thermos of coffee. "Drink this, warm up." She took the thermos with grateful hands, took a sip, smiled weakly. "You're a good man. What's your name?" Bob asked, pulling back onto the road. Sally Bramford." "Where were you headed, Sally?" "Home, to Caribou. Was visiting a friend in Presque Isle. And now..." She was shivering again, but no longer from cold. Bob drove in silence, thinking. Then, not looking at the girl, asked, "Where exactly did your car die?" Sally thought. "Near an old sawmill, I think. Some abandoned building, really close to the road. I tried to start the car, but..." Bob's heart clenched. "What kind of car?" "Toyota Corolla, gray. Why?" Bob didn't answer, pressed the gas. The truck accelerated. Sally looked at him in surprise. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Bob lied. "Just want to get to town faster so you can call." But something else was spinning in his head. Abandoned sawmill, old building, dead car. This was exactly how every disappearance on his list started. And if he wasn't wrong... "Sally," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "did you see anyone near that sawmill? Any other cars? People?" The girl shook her head. "No, nobody. Just me. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." But Bob knew that if Sally had stayed there, if she'd just waited on the shoulder, by morning she wouldn't be there, just an empty Toyota and another pin on his map. He drove her to Caribou, stopped at the police station. Sally got out, smiling, grateful. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You saved me." "You have no idea how much," Bob thought, but out loud said, "Take care of yourself, Sally, and don't drive alone at night anymore. It's dangerous." She nodded, waved goodbye, and ran to the station. Bob drove on. His hands trembled on the wheel. He pulled the truck over a mile later, just sat, breathing deeply, trying to calm down. He'd done it. Stopped, picked her up, saved her. Rick was right, so goddamn right. And now Bob was part of this, part of something he didn't understand. Curse, knowledge, duty, call it what you want. But he knew he couldn't drive past anymore, couldn't ignore people on the shoulder, because everyone he passed could become the next victim. 6 months, 12 runs, 8 people picked up on the shoulder. A student whose car broke down near Holton, an elderly woman lost in a snowstorm, a man with an empty gas tank, a young couple whose Ford hit a tree. Bob picked them all up, drove them to safe places, never told them the truth, just helped. And none of these people disappeared. None became a pin on his map, but others did. Over these 6 months, 4 more vanished. 4 people Bob couldn't save because he wasn't on that road, because he was too far away, because he didn't know. Bob wrote their names in a notebook, names and photos from newspapers, reminders that he couldn't be everywhere, that he couldn't save everyone, but he could try. The map on his apartment wall grew. Now it had over 100 pins, all disappearances over the past 15 years Bob could find in archives. The pattern was becoming clearer. Routes, patterns, regularities. Someone was hunting on these roads. Someone who knew where lone travelers would be. Someone who chose places, old, abandoned, forgotten. But who? And most importantly, why? Bob tried to find answers, read about serial killers, cults, paranormal phenomena, looked for connections, motives, anything. Found nothing. Until he met Margaret. It happened in March. Bob was sitting in Rosalie's diner in Bangor, eating pancakes with bacon and reading the newspaper. Article on page 3. Another disappearance on Route 2. Police continue investigation. "You've noticed, too," came a voice. Bob looked up. A woman in her 60s stood by his table. Gray hair, sharp blue eyes, hands stained with ink. "Excuse me?" Bob said. She pointed at the newspaper. "The disappearances. You're reading about them. I saw how you reacted." She smiled weakly. "I'm Margaret Holloway, journalist. Well, former journalist. Now just a woman investigating what no one else wants to investigate." Bob pushed the newspaper away. "I don't know what you're—" "Interstate 95, Route 1, Route 2. Over the past 15 years, 118 disappearances. All at night, all near abandoned buildings. No bodies, no traces." Margaret sat across from him without waiting for an invitation. "I've been investigating this for 10 years, writing a book. No one wants to publish it, of course. They say it's conspiracy theories, say I'm crazy." She leaned forward. "But I see how you're looking at that article, and I know you see it too." Bob was silent, weighing. This woman could be just another crazy conspiracist, or... "What do you know?" he asked quietly. Margaret smiled. "More than I'd like to." They talked for 2 hours. Margaret told him about her investigation, about the patterns she'd found, about witnesses she'd interviewed, people who'd seen something strange on those roads, lights in abandoned buildings, figures that vanish, sounds like chanting. "At first I thought serial killer," Margaret said. "One man hunting for years. But the more I dug, the less sense it made. No one person could operate this long, this efficiently, without a single mistake. No DNA, no witnesses, no bodies. This," she paused, choosing words, "this is something else." "What exactly?" Bob asked. Margaret looked him in the eyes. "Will you believe me if I tell you?" Bob thought about Rick, about the curse. "Try me." Margaret pulled a folder from her bag, opened it. Inside, a pile of photos, articles, handwritten notes. All these places, abandoned buildings where disappearances occur, have something in common. She spread photos on the table. "Look, this sawmill in Presque Isle, built in 1923, closed in 1967 after a series of accidents. 3 workers died. This cabin near Interstate 95, a family once lived there. All 5 died in one night, 1954. Carbon monoxide poisoning, they said. This farm on Route 2, owner shot his wife and himself, 1971. Bob looked at the photos, old, faded, but clear, abandoned places that remembered death. "In each of these places," Margaret continued, "someone died, usually a violent death, murders, suicides, accidents. And after that, the places change, become something more, something that attracts death again and again." "You're talking about what? Curses? Ghosts?" Bob tried not to sound skeptical, but it was hard. Margaret shrugged. "I don't know what to call it. I'm a journalist, not an exorcist, but the facts are facts. These places are deadly, and they keep collecting victims." Bob leaned back. His head was splitting from the information. "And the police? Do they know about this?" "They know," Margaret nodded. "But what can they do? Surround every abandoned building in Maine? There are hundreds of them, thousands. And how can they explain the disappearances? What, they'll tell people, 'Don't stop near old cabins, there's a curse'?" She laughed bitterly. "No, they classify it as separate cases, unsolved disappearances, and forget." "But someone has to do something," Bob said. Margaret looked at him long and carefully. "That's why I approached you, Bob McPherson, because I think you're already doing something." Bob froze. "How do you know my name?" "I'm a journalist, remember?" Margaret smiled. "I read about that night when you found Jennifer Coltrane, about the mysterious hitchhiker no one saw, about how you just decided to turn onto a dirt road." She leaned closer. "And I thought, either you're the luckiest man alive, or someone showed you, someone who knows." Bob didn't answer. Couldn't. "How many have you saved since then?" Margaret asked quietly. 8, Bob whispered. 8 people. Margaret nodded. 8 lives. That's not nothing, Bob, but there could be more if we work together." "What do you mean?" Margaret pulled out a map of Maine. It was marked, dozens, hundreds of locations. "I know where they are, all the dangerous places. 15 years collecting data. This map is the most complete database that exists." She looked Bob in the eyes. "And you drive these roads every day. You can be there. You can stop, help." "I can't be everywhere at once," Bob said. No, but you can be where it's most dangerous. Margaret pointed at the map. Look, statistics show more disappearances during certain periods. Full moon, peaks, new moons, decline. Friday and Saturday evenings, most dangerous, and certain places worse than others. Bob looked at the map. Margaret was right. There was a pattern. If you knew where and when to look, you could save more people. What do you want from me? He asked. Help me prove this, Margaret answered. Gather evidence, find answers, and save as many lives as possible. She extended her hand. What do you say? Bob looked at her hand, then at the map, then at his newspaper with another disappearance, and extended his hand. All right, he said. Let's try. 3 months they worked together. Margaret gave Bob routes, the most dangerous sections, highest risks. Bob drove, watched, picked up those who needed help. In those 3 months, 12 lives saved, 12 people who got home alive, and no new disappearances on Bob's routes. But other roads kept collecting victims. 3 vanished in June, 4 in July, 5 in August. Bob and Margaret did what they could, but it was like plugging a hole in a dam with your finger while the whole wall crumbled. We can't save everyone, Bob said one evening. They were sitting in Margaret's apartment, studying the latest reports. There just aren't enough of us. I know, Margaret replied quietly, but every life saved is a victory. We have to remember that. Bob nodded, but inside he felt emptiness because he understood until they found the real cause of these disappearances, until they stopped the source, this would go on forever. We need to go there, he suddenly said. Margaret looked surprised. Where? To one of these places, Bob pointed at the map. See it with our own eyes. Maybe find something the police missed. That's dangerous, Margaret warned. I know, Bob smiled grimly, but we're already doing dangerous things. They chose a location. The old cabin near Interstate 95, the same one where Bob found Jennifer Coltrane. According to Margaret's data, 6 people had disappeared there over the past 8 years. The place was active. They arrived at noon, deliberately chose daytime, didn't want to risk a night trip. Brought cameras, voice recorder, flashlights. Margaret also brought a cross. Better safe than sorry, she said. The clearing looked innocent in daylight. Grass, trees, ruins of the cabin, nothing sinister, just an abandoned place. But Bob felt it. Something in the air, something wrong. They entered the cabin carefully. Floors creaked underfoot. Light came through holes in the roof, illuminating dust in the air. Inside, empty. Old furniture covered in mold. Photos on the walls, faded with time. A family, man, woman, 2 children, smiling. Margaret photographed everything. Bob explored the rooms. In the bedroom, he found it. On the floor, under a layer of dust, drawings, scratched right into the wooden boards. Symbols Bob didn't understand. Circles, triangles, strange letters. Margaret, he called, look at this. She came, knelt by the drawings, pulled out a notebook, started copying them. This looks like occult symbols, she murmured. Maybe an attempt at protection, or the opposite, summoning something. Who would have drawn them? The family that lived here, or someone later? Margaret shook her head. Hard to say. They continued searching. In the basement, they found more symbols and something else. Blood. Old, dark, soaked into the earth. A lot of blood. Someone died here, Bob whispered. Or many someones, Margaret added. They left the cabin as dusk was falling. The sky darkened quickly, as always in Maine in fall. Bob felt relief getting into the truck, but when he turned the ignition key, the engine didn't start. What the hell? Bob tried again. Nothing, just the starter clicking. Maybe the battery? Margaret asked, but her voice trembled. Bob got out, opened the hood. Everything looked normal. Battery in place, wires intact. Just the engine wouldn't start. Or something wouldn't let it start. "We need to go," Margaret said. She stood by the truck, looking around. "Now, while there's still light." Bob wanted to argue, but something in her voice, something in the air around them, made him nod. They walked down the forest road back to the highway. 2 kilometers. Should take about 20 minutes. But darkness came fast. Too fast. 10 minutes into the walk, it was nearly black. The forest around them came alive with sounds, rustling, snapping branches, something like whispers. "You hear that?" Margaret whispered. Bob nodded, heard it. Voices, barely audible on the edge of hearing, like someone whispering their names. "Boob, Marguerite." They quickened their pace, almost running. Flashlights illuminated a narrow corridor between trees. Behind them, something moved. Bob heard footsteps, slow, heavy. "Don't look back," he hissed. "Just run." They ran. Roots caught at their feet. Branches whipped their faces. Flashlights bounced, illuminating chaotic images. Tree trunks, leaves, darkness, and then light. Far ahead, through the trees, car headlights on the highway. They burst out of the forest, almost falling onto the asphalt. Looked back. The forest stood quiet. No sounds, no movement, as if nothing had happened. But Bob knew, Margaret knew, something was there, something waiting, something that didn't want to let them go. They caught a ride to the nearest town, spent the night in a motel. In the morning, Bob returned with a tow truck for his rig. The engine started on the first try. No problems. Margaret deciphered the symbols for a week, found references in old books, occult texts, Native American legends, New England folklore. All pointed to one thing. Places of power. Places where the veil between worlds was thinner, where death left marks, where something could come through. "What exactly could come through?" Bob asked. Margaret shook her head. "I don't know. The books call it different things. Spirits, demons, guardians, but the essence is the same. These entities feed on death, kill to exist, and they're bound to certain places, places where there's already been blood. And how do we stop them?" Margaret looked at her notes silently. "I don't know, Bob. I honestly don't know." Bob drove. As always, run after run, mile after mile, but now he knew what he was fighting against, or thought he knew. Picked people up, saved them. 12, 15, 20, lost count. Every time he saw someone on the shoulder, something inside told him, "Stop! Help!" And he stopped. It became a habit, a reflex, part of who he was. But the pain grew, because every morning, reading the news, Bob saw new disappearances, new names, new faces, people he couldn't save. Guilt ate at him from inside. One evening in December, Bob sat in his apartment, looked at the map, at all those pins, at all those lives, and understood. He was losing, slowly but losing, because no matter how many he saved, someone else died. Someone he didn't reach in time, someone driving another road. The phone rang. Margaret. "Bob," her voice trembled. "I found something." "What?" "A list. An old list from church archives. 19th century." She spoke quickly, excitedly. "It's about road guardians, people who dedicated themselves to fighting evil on the roads. They patrolled, helped travelers, saved the lost." "And what happened to them?" Margaret fell silent. "They died." "Bob, all of them, one by one, because the evil they fought against, it doesn't forget. It finds those who stand in its way and takes them." Bob felt cold in his stomach. "You're saying—" "I'm saying be careful, very careful." Margaret's voice was serious. "What we're doing, it's important, but it's also dangerous, and if you continue, it will come for you." Bob looked at the map, at all those lives he'd saved. "Let it come," he said quietly. That same evening, mile 285 on Interstate 95, Bob was driving empty, freight already delivered, home to Bangor, thinking about Margaret's words, about road guardians, about death. And he saw him, kid on the shoulder, skinny in a denim jacket, thumb extended. Rick. Bob braked so hard the truck skidded, stopped, jumped out of the cab. Rick stood there, smiling. "Hello, Bob." You're real?" Bob couldn't believe his eyes. "As real as I need to be." Rick walked closer. "I've heard about you, about what you're doing. Saved a lot of people." "Thanks to you," Bob said. "You showed me. I passed on the curse," Rick interrupted quietly, "just like that old man passed it to me 9 years ago. Now it's yours, Bob. The knowledge, the duty, the curse." "Why?" Bob's voice broke. "Why did you do this to me?" "Because someone has to," Rick answered. "Someone has to see. Someone has to help. Otherwise they all die, in the darkness, alone, forgotten." Bob wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, but he knew Rick was right. "How much longer?" he whispered. "How much longer do I have to do this?" Rick shrugged. "As long as you can, as long as you're alive." He turned, started walking toward the forest, "and then you'll pass it to someone else, like I passed it to you." "Rick," Bob called, "how many are there? How many others like us?" Rick stopped, didn't turn around. "Not enough, Bob, never enough," and vanished into the darkness. Bob stood on the empty highway. Maine's forests rustled around him. Cold wind whistled in his ears. And he knew there was no going back. He was part of this now, forever. Spring 2027. Bob McPherson driving on Route 1. Freight, appliances for Presque Isle. Standard run. But he's not just looking at the road. He's looking at the shoulder, at shadows between trees, at places where someone might need help. In the past year, he'd saved 42 lives, 42 people who got home, to families, to friends, to life. Margaret published her book. No major publisher would take it, so she self-published. Roads of Death, Maine's Invisible Epidemic. Sold 300 copies. But someone's reading. Someone believes. Emmy called last week. First time in 6 years. Said she was proud of him. Didn't know why, just felt it. Bob didn't tell her the truth. can't, but when he sees someone on the shoulder, he stops, always, because he knows out there in the darkness something waits, something that feeds on death, something old and evil. And as long as Bob drives these roads, as long as he stops, as long as he helps, it won't win. Not completely. Maybe it's a curse, maybe a duty, maybe just the right thing to do. But Bob McPherson drives on, mile after mile, night after night. And when he sees a raised hand on the shoulder, he always stops, because someone has to. In Maine, there are roads that remember, roads that know. And if you're driving at night and you see someone on the shoulder, someone alone and lost, stop, help, because maybe you save a life, or maybe you'll become part of something bigger, something ancient, something that has no end. Thank you for listening till the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more interesting stories.